John English Brayley. You are Lower Canada College's direct connection to Vimy Ridge, the blood-soaked region of the Somme River Valley in France. You saw the horrors of World War I, felt them, suffered from them. As one of your classmates wrote to the headmaster, in a letter you mentioned that war was tougher than football. This is a rather bad comparison, and if you had compared it to Dante's Inferno, it would have been better. Although I'm sure that Dante's Inferno would be a tea party compared to the Somme front. You never returned to Montreal to share the stories of hellish suffering, heroism, or triumph. We know little about your life. We know little about your hopes and ambitions, only that you had them. Did they uplift your spirit amidst the bloodshed? Or did the war kill them, even before it did you? No known picture exists of you. A graduate of St. John's School, the forerunner of LCC, you attended the downtown campus, close to your family home. Little over a year before the school would move and rename itself in NDG. You had already experienced tragedy before the war, with the death of your father. Unlike many of your peers, you entered the labor market after graduating, selling real estate in Montreal. On March 1st, 1915, you made perhaps the most important decision of your life. You enlisted in the Canadian Expeditionary Force, answering the call by the Crown for troop deployment in Europe. You were almost 23 years old. What compelled you? We can only speculate. After being quickly trained in Sherbrooke and Valcartier as a part of the Quebec Regiment, you took a train to Halifax and were shipped to England for an even more brutal boot camp. By October 28, 1915, you were in France. In combat, you proved yourself, awarded the DCM for conspicuous gallantry. When all of his officers had been killed or wounded, he collected part of his company and led them under heavy fire to the rest of his company in the front line. This showed great courage and coolness under trying conditions. You had heard mention of an upcoming offensive, something significant, enough so to penetrate the German line and break the grisly stalemate. You'd never see that day in April 1917, the same ground that had repelled thousands of French and British infantrymen in 1915 and 1916, including your company, Lance Corporal Brayley. You'd never see the great coordination and victory of the battle. You'd never see Canada's bloodiest day in combat. You'd never see the end of Canada's deadliest war. And so, when you fought, you did so blind. No assurance that your efforts, that your sacrifice would amount to something. And yet, you valiantly held the torch high above your head. Or even if you fell, you trusted that another would be there to pick it up again, bearing the same trust himself. Now, more than a century later, the torch is in our hands. With it, we cast light upon your name and your memory, that of tens of thousands of Canadians who gave their lives in World War I, honoring your sacrifice. Thank you, Brayley. We will remember you.
Good morning. Bon matin. My name is Dr. Paul Kavanagh. This year marks the 105th anniversary of Vimy Ridge, le 105e anniversaire de Vimy. Now, 3 weeks after the battle, on 13 May 1917, the 10th Battalion, or if you prefer, the Calgary Highlanders, hosted a very special Thanksgiving Mass at Vimy Ridge. Alors, 3 semaines après la bataille, le 10e Bataillon organisé une messe le Crête de Vimy. Well, how do we know? Well, because our family has the original hymn that was either read or sung at this Mass. It was dated and signed by the commanding officer, Brigadier General Daniel Ormond, who was the grandfather of my brother-in-law. Notre famille, l'hymne original qui était lu ou chanté à cette Masse, était daté et signé par le commandant, Brigadier General Daniel Ormond, qui était le grand-papa de mon beau-frère. This hymn is now safely protected at the Canadian War Museum. Try and imagine yourself praying at this Mass where the Germans are still shelling the battlefield and snipers are active. Essayez de vous imaginer en train de prier pendant cette messe, alors que les Allemands bombardent encore leurs champs de bataille et que les tireurs d'élite sont encore actifs. Please listen carefully to the words. S'il vous plaît, écoutez attentivement les mots. Great God of nations, at whose will proud sceptered empires wax and wane. Defend our empires, people still. Unsheath thy sword for us again. For liberty and right we stand. O God, arise, stretch forth thy hand. Great God of battle, still their heart, who serve by land and air and sea. With honor let them play their part. With duty let their service be. Against cruelty and wrong we fight. O God, arise, put forth thy might. O God of pity, be thou nigh, where lurks the sunk, death-dealing mines, where blazing rooftops flush the sky, in reeking trenches and shattered lines. For motherhood and king we fight. O God, arise, maintain the right. O God of mercy, be our shield, and hear our dear ones far away. For them we stand on these blood-stained fields. For us they wait at home and pray. To thee we turn, to thee we cry. O God, lead on to victory. Amen. Lest we forget, nous nous souviendrons d'eux.